Hello, welcome everyone. I like to give people just a couple more minutes to join before we get started. Just another minute before we should be ready to kick things off. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Before our presenters begin, I want to share a few quick tips so you can get the most out of your webinar experience. Located on the top toolbar and on the right side, you'll see your settings and control panel. Here you'll find the audio and questions sections. In the settings section, you can find your audio options. This is where you can choose to tune in using your computer's connected speakers or audio devices, or by dialing in on your phone. In the questions section, indicated by the box with a question mark in the toolbar, we encourage you to submit any questions or comments you may have during the presentation by typing them there. We'll address those during the Q&A session at the end. Finally, there will be a live poll with questions for you to take part in throughout the webinar, and we'd like to thank you in advance for your participation in those. Now it's time for me to turn it over to our presenter, Andre Vieira, who is our Director, Access Network Product Marketing. The mic is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Yes, Andre Vieira, and I'm focused on helping service providers like you connect to their subscribers to their services and their communities to the world. And joining me today, I'm really excited to have my colleague Alan Marks, our cloud marketing from our cloud marketing team, and he definitely has the pulse on streamlining operations, reducing time to repair, all the great stuff, and creating actionable insights. And I'm really excited about having Mike Neverdusky from Cumberland Collect. He's the network operations manager. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
So just wanted to give everyone an agenda. Here's what what you're going to be learning today on the webinar. We're going to review some very interesting trends about the subscriber demand and what's really driving broadband services. And we're going to show you how to improve your network availability and things to think about in terms of capitalizing on these trends. We're going to describe for you what's important from a network availability standpoint in two key areas, network and obviously on the operation side. And Mike's going to share with you his perspective on operating as a service provider. And finally, you'll hear some best practices throughout the webinar, and hopefully you can take those back and implement those. And at the end, as Sunny mentioned, we'll have some time for hopefully for Q&A. And just to follow up on the housekeeping, I want to say please enter your question in the chat, and we'll work to try to answer some of those questions as we get along. With that, let's get started. So first, I wanted to share with you about subscriber needs. And as you know, over time, broadband internet services have changed, right? It used to be that, and I'm sure all of us can remember back when web surfing and searching and email was the primary use for the internet. But now, really, broadband services are really transforming people's lives by providing access to education, work from home, telemedicine, and it's becoming an essential service for all of us. I mean, I'm sure all of us here are working from an internet connection, either at our home or office, and it's important whether you're working from home or as a business or as a residential provider that you are, have a reliable connection. And as we look to the future, there's other opportunities for new applications that are going to demand more availability from that network. So, as I said, it's an essential service and we need to treat it that way. And those perceptions are changing over time. And what we like to say is that you, as a service provider, are really on the front lines of that. And as you see this trend moving forward, you will see this network availability and serviceability are very important to your subscribers. Let's take a look at next at just what our subscribers saying and what's important to them. Basically, we had most important factors for subscriber, according to a survey from the Fiber Broadband Association, is reliability of their broadband service. I know most people would think that it's going to be the speed, but in actuality, 78% of respondents said, "Hey, I want a reliable connection." Right? It's really important that I have that because of the things that I'm doing. And speed is important, but it's important only to a point. And as you can see, they talk about data caps and other things, but really it's reliability and availability of that connection. We're also seeing that customers, and we'll hear more about this in the webinar, see performance and reliability as the most important influential factor that they have for customer satisfaction. And that's important because it reduces churn rates, and we'll hear more about that. It really reflects on your brand as a service provider. So what are BSP saying? We did a survey of service providers um, last year, and most significant challenge, surprisingly, is network availability and reliability, right? For a number of different factors, and also improving the subscriber experience. So those are the top two that we've seen from service providers like yourself. We're going to survey you next just to see what your feedback is here pretty soon. But we're seeing the same trends from a service provider perspective and also from a subscriber and service perspective. Next, let's kind of switch gears and understand what are the causes for and the consequences of service outages and network availability. As you can see on the left side here, there's a number of different causes from natural disasters, which I'm sure many of us have been affected either personally or our families, but also as a business owner or subscriber, you're affected by these either because you're susceptible to things like earthquakes, flooding. Even as you can see on the left-hand side here, we had a beaver chew out a cable in Canada, I think last year. So you never know what's going to happen, and you have to be ready for these kind of things. You need to mitigate this impact. So it's impossible to predict a lot of these things, but as you can see, they do impact and could impact you. We also had this one down here where, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, but we had a buckshot or somebody shot a fiber. Can you tell that story a bit? Or
Yeah, that's what the customer told me, Andre, is that he was out, that's his farm there, and he had a problem with the foxes. I guess the foxes ran up the pole and were running around on the cable, and he shot at the foxes, and the result was like he took out half of the subscribers on a port by damaging like a couple of those fibers in that sheath with the bullet hole that you see next to the beaver.
yeah, definitely. That's what I would call human factors standpoint, but there's other things. So what are the consequences for this? I think many of us are aware of them, but sometimes we don't put them into perspective. There's obviously lost productivity from the subscriber perspective and also yours. There's lost information and opportunity costs, and there's financial loss and liability. Many of I know service providers have a contractual obligation to have service available. So there is financial liability in terms of you having to provide refunds back to your subscribers, or even in some cases, if the loss is big enough, to provide financial consequences to the FCC, for example. One of them that you probably don't think about is this impact to your brand and your reputation, which impacts your subscriber experience. And that's one that we don't often think about, but it's one that actually impacts your business on an ongoing basis. So how do we look at this is one way we've looked at network availability. And what you're looking at here is what we call the service provider common business model. On the left-hand side, I think a lot of us are spending time on funding and designing and building and operating the network. A lot of funding, building, and design, or what I like to call FD-BOM, is what I would call a lot of the upfront capital expense part of it. But you're going to find that you spend a lot of time in operating that network and continuing to scale it and trying to monetize that network. So it's important that you focus on the areas that I highlighted here in the orange, which is you can impact network availability in the design and build phase of your environment, which we're going to talk about, and you can impact it also in the operational side, which we'll touch on here in a bit. So that's really the focus here. Let me then next switch to our first poll question. Sunny, if you can get this going here. Okay. Okay, so let me just read through this while I answer the poll. What are the most important considerations in ensuring high availability? Number one is select any, being prepared for unplanned events, quickly identifying equipment failure, reducing maintenance windows, protection against cyber attacks, and mitigating human factors and configuration errors. And human factors, I would think about it not just your own as a service provider, but also your subscriber and how they configure their Wi-Fi, for example, and things like that. So let's see.
All right, let's share our results.
Perfect. All right, thanks. Yeah, wow. Being prepared for unplanned events, that's like number one. And quickly identifying equipment failures. Those are the top two. Reducing maintenance windows. I didn't see that. Is that Jive? Alan, I don't know if you or Mike want to comment on that, or is that consistent in the
I was
poll
just going to
windows?
say that I was thinking Mike probably voted twice for being prepared for unplanned events. But
Yeah,
but no, that was like, yeah, I pretty much expected that.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. All right, let's go. Let's move on. Next, I wanted to introduce Mike Neverdusky. He's from Cumberland Connect, and I just wanted him to give you an oversight of Cumberland Connect and also give you some background on himself. Go ahead, Mike. You're up.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. I appreciate the invite to the webinar today and getting to share this story. You know, as you and Alan both know, I'm very passionate about outage mitigation and management at Cumberland Connect. Not that we have a lot of them, but it's we've seen the impact that it can have. So just a little bit about us. We're an electric cooperative just north of Nashville in Tennessee, rather large. We've got 114,000 locations passed. We're still building our fiber project. We are relatively new in the fiber space. I've been around in the industry for a couple decades now, but Cumberland Connect took advantage of some new laws that passed in Tennessee to allow electric cooperatives to build fiber out, which is much needed in a lot of areas. So we've been doing it for almost 4 years now, and we've already surpassed 31,000 fiber customers. And as you can see, 4,700 fiber lines built. We'll be wrapping up construction at the end of the year. Super excited about that. And if you've been to any connections or anything like that, you've probably seen our NPS score up on the screen before. We take everything very seriously around here to make sure that everyone gets a great experience, and that's that's just the cooperative way, and that's how things are done. Take care of our members.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, and again, welcome. So let's talk a little bit about just network availability in general, and get your perspective as a service provider. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is network availability so important to your business?
I liked the graphs we had in the beginning that highlighted the importance of availability, because sometimes your subscribers or potential subscribers will tell you things like cost is the most important. I got this great deal from the other guy, so I'm going to stay with him a little longer. But in the beginning, that's important. But if you're not reliable and your service is down all the time, it becomes a differentiator to be better than the other guys, and it becomes a competitive advantage. And we've enjoyed that here. We've had some areas that just didn't have a good take rate right out of the gate because there was competitors in them. Obviously, there's parts of our project that are more rural where we're the only game in town, unless they want to stay with satellite for some reason. But in the competitive areas, we just don't see that take rate. The need's already been established by somebody else, and we just bide our time. We wait it out, and what we see is that we've built a more resilient network than the competition. And the competition being the major tier one players. We've got two major well-known cable companies in our area and a very well-known telephone company that runs fiber as well. And there have been outages by the other guys, and we've seen that in extended outages in one of our areas, particularly actually where I live. One of those providers had 2 outages in a week last year, and one of them took 2 days to repair. It was a single fiber cut, but in my estimates, they lost about 40 to 50,000 subscribers from a single fiber cut due to poor network architecture. And we had more signups that week than we did when we opened that zone to initially say we're here, all because people knew we were there and other people were vouching for our reliability, and people didn't care. They made the switch after that. So it was really huge for us, and they churned a lot, and we tried to manage our outages very well to keep that from happening. And
Well,
just to kind of touch on some of the points on here, Andre, I don't think, are there different expectations for different subscriber types? I really don't think so. Everybody's paying money. They feel that their dollar is valued. And, whether that's a big enterprise or if that's just a residential household, they want the service to work. It's an inconvenience to them if it's not working. And it's the provider's responsibility to build a system that has a very high level of uptime.
you know,
And
hey, I had a quick question. Have you seen a change in expectation over, you said 4 years? Have you seen a change in expectation from your subscribers, or has it been consistent? I know we went through this COVID time and all that, but
I think they always expect the same. It's the only area where it's going to change over time is the area where it was rural and we were the first people in there, and they were just thankful and grateful that we built fiber to them. Everybody else had neglected them for years, but over time, fiber is going to be normal out there again. It's just going to be part of life, and their kids are going to forget that there was a day without fiber, right? So they're going to have the same expectations that everybody else does eventually in the big cities where it's competitive. That you got to keep, just like you got to keep the lights on, you got to keep the fiber lights on too. So,
understood. And what are your 3 keys for managing network availability? What have you learned? What's your wisdom?
well, I have 3 things we follow. So first of all is if you can mitigate outages, do so. Architect your network and engineer it in such a way that if you do have a fiber cut, it impacts the least amount of people. Second is your response. You're always going to be judged on your response, so time to repair is critical. So it's really important to make sure you have the tools to accelerate outage notification and identification, which everybody also vouched for in that poll we just saw. And then the last one is kind of a hidden art, but that's communicate. Your subscribers want communication during an outage. They want to know 3 questions. Do you know that I'm out? Hopefully the answer is yes. How long will it be while I'm out? And what happened? And I can get into that in great detail later in the webinar, but there's some great things. If you follow those 3 things and try to do those things well, you will have outages, but if you communicate well and stay in touch with them and explains what's happening, there's a higher chance that they're going to stay with you and build some trust with you as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about some of the anecdotes around that. So thanks for sharing, Mike.
No problem.
Okay. So first, as I said, what we're going to cover is leveraging your network for service availability, and then as we'll cover the operations side first. So let's get into the network side of this. So what I did was, and is sharing with you the availability domains, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of these domains. So we'll start with the premise domain, which tends to be the resident or the business or the office, or in some case it could be a multi-tenant district, dwelling unit or something like that. There's always that domain and what you have to do there. Then we'll focus on what I call the access aggregation domain, and that's where obviously you connect you with fiber access to your customers, but you also do aggregation and some type of subscriber management in that domain. And then finally, there's the domain where you aggregate. If you have multiple zones, like you saw with Mike's example, you're going to have to aggregate all this traffic and bring it to a point where you connect to the internet, either at one location or multiple locations, and you need to aggregate that traffic and optimize that. So let me step through that. So first, let's talk about, the premise, right? Typically, when you think about the premise, you think about some kind of termination point for your network, or the residential gateway as being a termination point. And really, the service impacts fall into a number of areas. You have obviously the one we talked about earlier, which is power outage. And first, if you consider power outage, and I would take that off the table unless you're obviously in a hospital or a business where you pay for critical services. You will have backup power and backup in the premises. But chances are, if the power goes out, your computers and your devices are going to lose power unless you're running a generator or something like that. But it's important to have some kind of backup if you do have power outages for essential businesses, for example, your town, if you're managing your community, and make sure that you're protected for that, and have even spare equipment, right? Because if you have equipment failure, if you have a premium service that provides spare equipment, that's one way to factor in the and support a premium type service, right? And support availability. The other thing is from a Wi-Fi perspective, right? The most three things that we've seen on our side that are problems that affect availability is, number one, the subscriber can't get the SSID. That is actually one that affects availability, and not being able to understand where to get that information. And actually that impacts you because you get support calls and so forth. The second one is Wi-Fi could provide poor coverage, and in the sense that it's not properly set up, so it covers and you lose availability, and the subscribers is frustrated. And the third one is interference from other Wi-Fi or other electromagnetic signals in the environment in the neighborhood. So those are the three things, and these really are the three things that generate a lot of the support calls and the truck rolls that you're going to face. And that to me means operational expense. It means frustrated subscribers, and we really want to prevent that. A couple of key areas that allow you to do that is in the misconfiguration. If you could provide the subscriber with the tools to self-help and diagnose their own problems, that gives you a first line of defense as a service provider to allow the subscriber to fix their own, to give them the tools, an app or something for them to fix their own issues. The second one is you can provide or deploy intelligent systems that support dynamic channel change, things to look for, or beam steering, or things that allow you to support better coverage. And also what you can do is, and we've offered this type of service where, and I've seen this, is for actually to map out, what the coverage is going to be, especially if it's a large environment or a field or an outdoor environment, to map that out and provide a service to actually see what the coverage is going to be. And it could depend a lot about the seasons, how many trees, what the environment is like, as an example. But the important thing here is to reduce truck rolls, provide the subscriber self-help, give an opportunity for the subscriber to solve their own problems themselves, and provide intelligence into the deployments that you offer your subscribers. Next, we'll focus on network availability in the access and aggregation domain. And as I said before, this is access aggregation, but also you're doing, and you should be doing subscriber management in this particular domain. And if you look at the scope of this, this talks about not just the equipment, but also the outside plant. As you know, PON in some cases could be single fiber going to someone's house. And it's important that you identify if customers needs additional protection to provide that protection, right? So, for example, a lot of it depends on the service and how you connect and route your traffic in the network. So it's important to think ahead in the build and design phase of your network. If you have certain parts of your territory, for example, that require redundant paths to get to a customer or a particular area, like a business park, for example. Um, and then in this area, as you get into the aggregation phase, you could be aggregating traffic from thousands of subscribers. So you want to be able to build in-service upgrade and redundant controllers and redundancy into this part of your network, especially your access network, as you start impacting more and more subscribers. Imperative that you reduce that you have redundancies in place and that you deploy in systems and networks that provide redundancy. And then finally, from a fiber cut perspective, you could have situations where you're going to have them where you have active components that fail, and you have additional failure points that reduce the overall reliability, or you could have situations where there's a direct failure due to imminent failures, which is probably the most frustrating one, right? Where there's something that's imminent. And you need systems in place, and you'll hear about that a little bit in the operations side, that give you a heads up in terms of when that can happen so you can resolve the problem in advance, as an example. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about high availability strategies for the network. As I mentioned, standby, but a lot of us have been deploying rings, and this is a standard approach now for access networks, and also lag for the uplinks to provide multiple paths. And we'll talk to Mike a little bit about some of these strategies here in a bit. Next, let's talk about the what we call the aggregation domain. And in the aggregation domain, this is where a large amount of your traffic is aggregated from a service perspective. It's highly important that this part of the network be resilient, right? You want to focus on network availability, but this part of the network also provides you scaling, performance, and the ability to optimize and the ability to deliver and manage and troubleshoot large issues if there's a failure. Our strategy here would be to deploy a, uh, a network that provides redundant paths, leverage IGP routing protocols over fast restoration times, provide bidirectional forwarding detection to speed up the detection of failures. Think about segmenting your traffic here, also so that the segmentation provides you distinct quality of service and SLAs as you need it. And you might be able to use the segmentation also to provide business services and isolate business services from other types of services. I would also talk about here implementing ECMP and load balancing to be able to load balance your traffic and have multiple uplinks up to protect your service. And finally, I would say use network technology, virtualization technology like layer 2 and layer 3 VPNs. This allows you to have different levels of resiliency in your network and also have the flexibility to prioritize higher timers and protocols, so you can prioritize what traffic gets up fast, gets restored much quicker, and allows you to provide better coverage for, let's say, your own internal traffic, right? Your management traffic, or also your business and residential traffic. So something to think about. And then the last item I'll mention here is it's important to have dual homing in your peering if you can get it, because that allows you to reduce downtime for a very critical part of the network, which is your internet peering point, and enable to provide and push technologies that allow you to support multi-homing, so that you can recover from a disaster, let's say of an office failure or loss of a connection and so forth to your internet peering provider. Next, Mike, what I want to do is let's see if we can talk a little bit about, get your perspectives on the network and some of these things we talked about and mentioned here in the different domains.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to comment on some of these. So you've got the premises up there first. As far as redundancy and resiliency goes, you covered the making sure the power's on and I got a battery backup. But just a comment on that, if it's important to put in just good reliable products in the homes too, and ones you have visibility into. So for us it was critical to have visibility all the way into the home, because when something does go wrong, we don't want to leave that subscriber stranded. We wanted to be able to go all the way into the router, in our case the different GigaSpire platforms that we deploy, and help them out, because at the end of the day, sometimes when the internet goes out, they don't say the internet went out, they say the Wi-Fi went out. That's how some of our users are today. They just don't understand how it works. They don't need to. That's our job. So we do try to take care of them and make sure we have full access to take care of them inside the home. The rest of that access and aggregation and the peering and all that, that's my pride and joy of what we've accomplished here. So Andre, I know you mentioned the rings. We do deploy G.8032 rings. We have the Calix E7 platforms in our system, so mostly layer 2. But one of the things that was kind of novel at the time in 2019, 2020 when we deployed was back then, most people just had a single access or single point on the network that would upload to the core. So each ring, while it was redundant, could fail in different directions, only had one leg out to their core network. And that was with some other vendors, that's actually was forced that way. I've had the opportunity to work with other platforms other than just Calix over my years, and they had to have a primary node on that ring, and if that primary node went down, you lost the entire ring. So one of the more novel things that we did is reached out to Calix when we were designing everything and said, hey, I don't want a single point of failure on my ring. Can I dual home my rings back to my cores? So we built a kind of the aggregation and peering level. We have 3 different routers and 3 different geographic locations in different data centers. And we made sure that all of our rings had 2 different sites that fed back to 2 different routers in different locations. So we don't have a single point of failure. I think one of the common misconceptions early in the industry, and I was guilty of this as well early on in my career, was that cross card lags or running something back to different cards on the same chassis is redundancy. It is in a sense, but at some point while the network is out there, that whole chassis is going to fail. It's going to, like Andre mentioned, there's going to be an intermittent problem where packets start getting dropped because there's CPU problems or things like that, and you're still going to lose that entire segment of your network. So it's important to design everything like that and make sure that you can take a device offline or cut a route and everything just fails over. So that's super important to us. We have multiple ISP connections, just like you mentioned. We make sure we get KMZ files and none of them cross, and they're right in the country and not crossing at any points. And I say we have 3 data centers, and that's kind of not true. We have a main data center, we have like a backup data center, but having multiple data centers sounds expensive. I know not everybody can afford that. So if that's not in your plans to have a second data center somewhere, just consider a CO or one of your hub sites somewhere. Add another rack in there and maybe beef up the air conditioning a little bit, and you can convert one of those locations into a kind of a secondary or third data center really quickly and easily, and we've done that as well. Just a quick story if we have time.
Yeah.
We had a big event about 4 years ago. We had a bomb blow up in Nashville, and it hit one of the tier 1 providers down there, and it was surprising to me that the single building caused an outage that affected the majority of Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama in some aspects or differences. And it was told, I was informed by some people in the know that there was redundancy, but it was all in the same building. So they had redundant routers and things like that, but I don't necessarily call that redundancy. But we had a similar incident that caused the data center, not a bomb, thankfully, but we had a generator fuel leak in one of our data centers. And my favorite part of that day, the whole data center went dark, but my favorite part of that day was when I walked in there and our IT guys came running up to me and said, "What's down on your side?" I said, nothing. It all failed over immediately to our other data center because we have active systems. So we had a similar incident where we lost a critical data center as a tier one provider in our area, one of our competitors. However, none of our subscribers were aware. And that's what taking that extra time to engineer and architect things a little bit different and think about single points of failure really can benefit you.
Yeah. No, I agree. You want to do that in that design phase, right, of your network and think through, even in some cases, I think people talk to their town planning. Is there a new facility going to be added? Is there going to be a business zoning area? And just have those conversations up front so that you can design and build, like you said, separate data centers, right, to protect your services. Thanks, Mike. Great insight. Thanks. Next, we're just going to do a quick poll. So, Sonny, if you can get that going, which of these network resiliency strategies will have the most business impact to you as a service provider? Number one, subscriber Wi-Fi self-diagnostic and issue resolution. Number two, capacity planning. Number three, traffic management. Number four, perform regular upgrades and maintenance. Number five, network redundancy. So like to see. I, I think I know what the answer is, but I'd like to hear what the audience says.
All right,
How we doing, Sonny?
good. Let's check it out.
All right. Did you share the poll? I can't see it, so if you did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and no surprise to me, network redundancy, we were just talking about it. It's one where it really allows you to sleep at night I know as a network engineer, and Mike, maybe you could speak to your thoughts on I know you just talked about the dual locations, but network redundancy really goes a long way. And the just planning that out in the design phase is very important, including not just equipment, but also fiber routes and so forth. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%, Andre. I sleep very well at night knowing that I don't have to get up and push a button for anything to fail over in my network. So that's it's very reassuring, and I get a good 8 hours of sleep, sometimes 6 or 7 when the kids are playing soccer all night.
Understood. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Alan Marks. He's going to take you through leveraging operations tools to improve service availability. And this is an important part of, we talked about reducing mean time between failures with redundancy of the network. Now we're going to talk about a bit about mean time to repair and reducing that in the subscriber experience. So take it away, Alan.
All right, thank you, Andre, and good afternoon, everyone. So, looking at it from an operations perspective, there's a lot that we can do to improve service availability when our operations tools are providing, detailed visibility and insights into what's happening across the network. And, so here are some of the things that we have at our disposal to do this. So the first is real-time visibility of network performance. Operators need to be able to look at, a geomap of their service area and quickly see service disruptions and network events and alarms and the subscribers that are impacted. Um, the next thing is proactively monitoring the network. If we're proactively monitoring the network, then we'll be able to identify issues before they impact subscribers, or at a minimum, reduce the response time, as Mike was talking about before. Um, and then, of course, obviously, one of the most important things we can do to improve service availability is to quickly identify outages and service disruptions along with those impacted subscribers. So collecting and analyzing alarm and health information from the network, allows us to understand, in real time where outages or service disruptions are and what's the cause and who is impacted. And doing this as quickly and as accurately as possible will certainly improve service availability. Finally, we can look at what's becoming more and more of an operations ecosystem that spans different systems and teams. And if we can automate the sharing of critical information across this ecosystem, so that, for example, outages are quickly detected, and then the outage information is sent to another OSS system, and then that information is used to create a work order or dispatch a technician or message subscribers. If we can automate this and use machine-to-machine communications, then we'll greatly reduce the time that it takes to respond to outages, as well as the amount of manual effort that's required to get the right information to the right people at the right time. And we're doing this now with some customers I'll talk about in a bit. But you can go on to the next. Yeah, there we are. So, what do some of these things look like, right? So in the case of real-time visibility, what you're able to do is look at that service area, as I mentioned, the map, and see the real-time status, right? This is something that can be, filtered very specifically. So let's say you want to look at different systems in different locations, or you want to look at OLTs or ONTs or both, or you may want to filter this by service disruptions, right? So that you can have a quick view of just the service impacting issues. One of the ways, if you were at Connections, one of the ways I've seen customers use this is in correlating multiple kind of geographically related alarms into a single cause, like a fiber cut. Some of those pictures that Andre showed earlier, you might see this on the map where along a route there are, several different ONT alarms that are sort of, you can kind of see that they're geographically related, and then this can help you identify a fiber cut or a particular outside plant issue there. In addition, when there are subscriber impacts, you want to be able to quickly click on a link that shows you all of the impacted subscribers. So on this screen here, I'm just showing at the bottom right of the slide here, you can see that, when you have something like, for example, pond capacity hits or, exceeding thresholds, you can click on a hyperlink of that, for example, problem interface, and you can see a detailed list of all the impacted subscribers. You can go to the next slide. Right. So what can we do to proactively monitor the network? So one of the things that we can do is actively monitor ONT optical levels, right, and report on this to the operations team. So, the way something like this works is that we create an automated workflow. It identifies when these ONT light levels are below a certain threshold, and when this happens, it triggers a report to be sent via email, for example, to the appropriate folks. So, this report identifies the so-called outlier ONTs along with their, important operating data like the upstream and downstream bit error rates and the optical transmit and receive power. So, keep in mind that, you'll set this threshold to evaluate where the ONT is still operational, right? So that will allow you to use this information to proactively identify trends in the degrading optical performance of these ONTs before they impact subscriber services. So that's the key, right? To sort of proactively be monitoring all of these things. You can go to the next slide. Yep. Right. So as I mentioned before, quickly identifying the outages and the service disruptions, understanding who's impacted, what the cause is, reducing the amount of time it takes to respond, restoring service as quickly as possible. This is critical, right? This is all about improving service availability. So, in order to do this, we want to be able to provide the operations folks with a few different things, right? One is that simple and clear view on the geomap, as I was talking about, with all of the service disruptions and outages and the causes and impacted subscribers. This can be easily filtered to identify only the service disruptions, and thus, putting this critical information right in front of the ops folks. In addition, we want to automate the real-time notifications for these disruptions, right? We need to know, we want to, have a workflow that sends a report when these things happen in real time, right? As soon as they happen, a report will be generated and be sent to the appropriate people. So you can see down sort of at the bottom right of this slide here, this is the report that includes all the information that you would need, or maybe another system could use to kick off a workflow for creating a work order or dispatching a technician, or even messaging subscribers about the outage status and the time to restore and that sort of thing. You can go to the next slide. So, another important aspect of this whole thing is, and Mike mentioned this, is this sharing information, right? So sharing information across different systems and teams, right? How can we use like machine-to-machine automation, for example, to share this outage and service disruption data between, for example, the network ops folks and customer support teams and the field techs, right? And, so when we again, when we look at this as like an operations ecosystem, we have our Calix cloud, which of course, is part of our broadband platform. We have data and insights from the other elements of that platform, intelligent access and unlimited subscriber. And we have a whole partner universe, right, that can integrate with this. So the whole sharing of critical information is a lot easier to do, right? We can provide network outage information to third-party BSS and OSS systems, for example, and we can also provide the network outage information to our other cloud tools like Service Cloud and Engagement Cloud. So, this is something that we see really improving service availability because it reduces the amount of time that it takes for different teams to get the information that they need to help the subscribers and to troubleshoot issues and restore service. So on the next slide, I mean, what does this look like in a real deployment? Yeah, essentially it provides us with an integrated solution for outage management, right? So already today with some of our customers, we deployed this solution where there's an automated process that detects outages. It sends the outage information to the service provider's OSS system via a webhooks mechanism, for example. And then this allows that system to use the details in the outage message to provide the appropriate information to other systems like a trouble ticketing system or to other teams like customer support and the field techs. And all of this is done in much less time than it typically takes where where it's required to have more human intervention and manual steps and folks using multiple tools and having different data formats and having to convert things from one format to another and so forth. And yeah, so this is something that we've deployed with one of our one of our customers OSS partners today, and and we're expanding it to more partners. And so, not only expanding this particular use case to, excuse me, to more partners, but also, working with other partners to integrate additional information like, fiber mapping information into this outage management and things like electrical grid mapping, particularly for, a customer like Cumberland, who is also an electric co-op. They actually have that information, of course. So, integrating this into the outage management solution will be even better. Let's see, what do we have next?
Yeah, your
Next, yeah.
Mike's
So
perspective.
let's. Oh, sorry, Andre.
No, I was just gonna say, Mike. We want to get Mike's perspective on the operational.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, thanks. I love that Alan shared all that because we find out everything that Alan just shared very valuable here at Cumberland Connect. So we use things like the optical outlier report as part of our proactive support. So our goal here is not to wait for subscribers to call in and notify us of a problem or an outage. I think if you're waiting for subscribers to call you and notify you that there's an outage, you could do better. It's not a good experience. So we were actually using the outlier report just recently. I was sharing this with Alan and Andre the other day. We called the gentleman and he was on the optical outlier report because his light level went down at his house significant enough to end up on the report. And he said, "Oh yeah, I went and bought my own fiber jumper and moved it across the house, moved the router across the house because I wanted it somewhere else." And he said, "I'll call you if I have a problem, but it's running fine." So I just thought that was kind of funny. I think it's probably the first person out of 30,000 people that we know of that bought their own fiber jumper and moved their router. Um, but I just wanted to share a little bit about. I think Alan and Andre would not invite me back to speak again if I didn't mention this. This is one of Alan's favorite catchphrases. I just want to reiterate this. If you don't take anything away from this, just remember that subscribers are only loyal to the last big outage. Once you have a big outage, if you don't manage it well and handle it well, they're gone. And once they leave, you got to wait for the other guys to stub their toe on something before they're going to come back. So that's why outage management is really important, and knowing what's going on in the network and getting these alerts and real-time visibility and what's happening is really important for us. So we use the Ops Cloud. We actually use the predecessor to Ops Cloud because I saw the value in it. And yeah, we had just had an outage today, and we got an alert. Our NetOps team jumped on it. It was small enough outage, so we just had all of our team call everybody. But we wanted to get out there and get that fixed as soon as possible. So you just got to know, because if you don't know and they're having to call in, if you're waiting for enough people to call in, you're hoping that your TSRs are paying attention, that they're talking to each other and correlating the fact that they just got 3 calls from the same area before you finally realize that. I've been in that situation before. It's not fun. So you gotta have the visibility. You have to have that knowledge. And then the one big thing, and I touched on earlier, was the communications of the outage. So every outage has a narrative. It has a story. It's the beaver. It's the fox that ran up the pole, that we saw earlier. We've had goat chews. It's anything inside the house, believe it or not. And so we decided early on that communication was actually one of the 3 critical components of outage management. And our goals are to reach out to the subscriber, answer those 3 questions as quickly and efficiently as we can. And we're working with Calix and our OSS BSS on platform. We're getting to kind of where Alan presented the end goal for everybody should be of automatic outage notification. We can just push things out. But if you're not controlling the narrative of an outage, the subscribers will control it for you. Just get in any Facebook group where you have an outage and watch what they start saying. That's the first thing they do nowadays. If they're in a community, just jump on Facebook. They don't call your tech support, say, hey, is there an outage in my area? No, they get on Facebook and they say, is anybody else having a problem? Oh, no, it's just me. Okay, I'll figure it out. But if everyone else jumps on, if you don't step in and control the narrative with some kind of communication, all they're going to do is build a negative narrative for you. And that's important to get a hold of.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's so valuable because it really leads to your brand, the brand loyalty, and your, like you said, your NPS score, right? And the last thing you want to do is have subscribers that switch over when something happens to a different provider, right? That you want to have a subscriber that says, "Hey, I have confidence and I'm getting information. Yes, my service is down, but I have some information, and they are aware that when they're going to get me back or communicating with me." That's so important.
Yeah, and if you share the picture of that beaver as part of that story, it becomes almost a positive, funny experience at that point because they realize you didn't do anything wrong. It's just you're a victim as just as well as they are, and they'll appreciate that.
Right. Stuff. I guess stuff happens, but it's. I think people feel better when they're informed about what's going on. I agree with that. That
Yeah, we're
makes a lot.
overtly honest with the root cause of our problems to build trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
totally agree. And the quicker you do that, the better it is, right? The quicker you do that, for sure. The quicker you know what's going on, and then you can control that narrative, and then you can tell a funny story about the beaver or the fox or whatever else, right?
Yeah. For
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. We have a quick poll on the operations side. Thanks, Sunny, for posting that. Which of these operations capabilities would you have the most positive impact on? You think would have the most positive impact on service availability? Real-time visibility of network performance, proactive monitoring the network, quickly identifying outages and service disruptions, and automating communications across your systems, your BSO, OSS, and your teams. Let's see what comes up, Alan. Sunny, are we ready to share?
Yep, you should see it now.
Yeah, what I really like about these results, Andre, are that it's pretty balanced, right? So what that says to me is that, when folks look at these operations capabilities, it's like it's all important, right? All of this is going to affect service availability, right? You need to have this real-time visibility. You need to proactively monitor. You have to communicate, like Mike was saying, you have to quickly identify, service impacting stuff. So yeah, I think that's great. That's sort of what I would expect that, folks would see that there's like, the broad reach of these operations capabilities for the service availability issue.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, thanks everyone for your input there. Okay, quick summary. Before I summarize here, I just want to remind you we may have time for a couple of questions. Sunny, are we getting any questions, Q&A activity?
It looks like we have a couple.
Okay, let's see if we can get to those. So I'll quickly summarize. First, I want to thank everyone for joining the call. I hope this was insightful and you gotten some valid feedback. Obviously, follow up with us as you move forward. But I wanted to highlight things that Mike said about network availability and Alan, right? It's really a foundation what I call a foundational requirement for subscriber experience, and it's also a way of competitively differentiating yourselves from other competitors. And it's not just the network itself, but it's also how you respond to an outage or how you understand it or have this prescriptive way of dealing with potential outages before they happen, and having those tools, whether they're in the network foundation themselves or in the operational side, that's really going to help you from a ROI and keeping your subscribers happy, which is important in reducing the churn rate, reducing truck rolls, and making you the go-to provider as you deploy new services. The next thing is implement best practices. Mike talked a lot about those. Streamline your operation, reduce not just mean time between failure, but MTTR, and focus. The other thing I would emphasize is focus also on the design phase of your network. If you're growing into a new area, or you just want to tune up your existing network and go back to it now that you're done with your development. And then finally, as to what Mike said, right, communicate with subscribers and stakeholders, control the narrative. I like what you said there, Mike. It's really important that you take the lead, take the horse by the reins and take the lead on that. So really, really powerful. Quickly, I just wanted to quickly highlight, the Calix broadband platform. It's really the foundation that you saw a lot of the capabilities that were mentioned here for delivering these enhanced services and even allowing you to provide smart life experiences to your subscribers, right? It empowers, your teams with a comprehensive and unified and integrated and expandable solution that supports subscriber digitally connecting to their lifestyle. And it really consists of the software-defined modular access solution, and it includes our extensive portfolio of premises systems with advanced Wi-Fi technology that supports some of the availability items we talked about there and best practices. And then it has this powerful cloud layer that really simplifies the support and the operation side and provisioning and the service assurance of your network. So really powerful. And then finally, this is one thing that you're getting here is this network is built around using the telemetry from the aggregation, the access, the premises, and all those layers to gather that data to provide insight on the network, the services, and the subscribers, right? To use that data to drive that power in. Really quick next steps, sign up for a design consult, request a demo of our Ops Cloud, Operations Cloud, and our Service Cloud capabilities. So with that, why don't we go to the question, real quick survey as we go to the questions. Why don't we go to the questions while we're doing this quick survey, Sunny? Just let us know what you're interested in learning more about real quick, and then we can answer a few questions with the time we have remaining. Alan, do you want to go through the questions? I can't see them because I'm presenting and it doesn't let me.
Yeah, I can go through the questions. Now, one of the questions got me sort of thinking of something a little different, but the question was, how do you handle localized power outages? Do you provide backup power units to the owners? Now, so what that got me thinking of is not exactly that, but it did get me thinking of the customers. Some customers have told me that they've been using the operations tools, Operations Cloud to where they've set, I don't know if you're doing this, Mike, but they've created the notifications, the alarm notifications for the battery, for the low battery alarm and things like that. And obviously it's not a solution for when there is no power, but it would be something that's useful to say, hey, let's be proactive about this so that in case there is a power outage, folks aren't having like batteries that only have 10 minutes of life left, right?
And Alan, this is Mike. Just to answer that question, I read that one too. So all the GigaSpires that we deploy have an optional auxiliary power input where you can plug a battery pack into. And if you're selling phone service, that is an FCC requirement to be able to at least sell a battery backup to your subscribers.
Okay, yep. And then you can
Yeah.
monitor that battery. Can you monitor that battery in Ops Cloud, right?
Yes, you can.
Or
Yeah.
through? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and also adding, providing, depending on the service level, you can provide battery backup for subscribers, right? If there's an as a service level, right? In terms of I wouldn't call it an SLA per se, but let's say it's a business or something, that may be an arrangement that you can do as part of your service offering. Any other questions? Well, we got maybe a minute. Maybe there's another one we can answer, or
I don't see any more questions, but I also think we're out of time.
oh, cool. Well, thanks, Alan, and thank you, Mike. Really appreciate you for joining us
Thanks, Mike.
today and sharing your insights on network availability, and the value of the value to your subscriber and your business. Um, I hope everyone found this helpful. Thanks again for joining the webinar, and look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andre.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.